Welcome to Theory Under. Dang it.
Okay.
I tried to do it with a straight face.
I know, dude.
Nance, why is your head so big?
Dude, my brain just got huge. My head just got bigger because my brain just grew. Because Sahil, we just did Sahil's second lecture for Capital Mondays. He recapped chapter 1 with a special focus on section 4 of chapter 1, the fetish. And then he did a brief pass through of chapter 2. And then he drew out the connective tissue between the first 3 chapters, really, but he really only went into detail on the second chapter. And it was fucking fire, dude. It was very, very, very good.
He really took his time. He was very deliberate. He really worked. You could tell that he's been working on his craft and thinking about what he wants to say to us hooligans. And I was like, did he listen to us reading the rest of chapter 1? He must have at one point. And sure enough, he did. And so for people who are just popping in, this is your first time ever. We don't normally look like this because our brains aren't normally this large, because, it swells up if you listen. And if you listen at double speed, there's a danger that it'll expand too fast. And so, don't try this at home, kids. That's the main thing. Okay. All right. But, no, this is, MCM prime versus arguably CMC prime. We're also saying, CM T squared.
T cubed.
T cubed. Oh, thank God. Yeah, no, thank you. That's right. Yeah. So that's right. MCM prime versus CMT cubed. And of course, last time this happened, we had to explain ourselves in the chat. And every time this comes up, people are going to be wondering, what is that? And that's good, because it gets us to talk about the things that we are most excited to talk about. At some point towards the end, during a question where all I'm actually doing is improv lecturing, I do say, what the 3 T's are and relate that to Benjamin Studebaker's contribution to time energy theory and the seminar that is ongoing for that. And, before we turn this thing over to a little plug for that ongoing time energy seminar, as well as the critical media theory seminar, which are a couple of the coolest things going on at Theory Underground on a given month. Let's say a couple more things about the meat and substance of this lecture that Sahil gave, or other stuff related to this podcast, or things that people might want to have in mind. And so, Rudy, you've been very polite and contemplative looking, but do you have anything that you would want to share out before we get into the subscription plug?
Yeah, this happens because I'm still immortal. My brain did not grow. I think I did not.
You weren't listening.
I was not listening. These were turned off. Lecture. No, I really liked it. I really like what he does. I think it's great that he tries to also kind of sublate this opposition between, is Marx doing a critique or not? And I think he put it very well. I will think about that. And since we talked about this a little bit, I would add the caveat that the question I raised in this one with the movement and alienation is meant as a methodological inquiry into what Marx is doing. What is his presupposition that he's operating under? Because I think you were correct in our off-camera conversation to point out that this gets often maybe wrongly conflated. Maybe they don't read Marx close enough, where people, especially from accelerationism, go yeah, alienation good, actually. Alienation all the way. And I think it's not that easy. Not even for Marx. So far from what I've read and what I've thought about, I don't think that's correct. But maybe also alienation necessary? Question mark.
And
I mean,
Rudy
I
cannot. I'll just say it's a quick little interjection, and that's to say that Rudy, don't mess up your streak, man. You've seen every episode of this show, so you got to make sure you do the Strange Labor one if you haven't. Yeah, you did. You did it. Okay, never mind. Sorry. Well, everyone else, you better go watch that one. That one's really important. So, okay, go Nance.
No, I think on that note, like some amount of alienation necessary. I think we did touch on it in the Strange Labor reading, but yeah, I think adopting a realist position of like, yes, there's some degree of alienation that's included in being human. Sure, but then that raises, well, then there's a qualitative difference between like this type of alienation, this self-reproductive alienation, and this other alienation that goes on to reify. Sahil fucking laid it all down beautifully. The fetishism, the reification, the alienation. It's in this episode for everybody watching. But yeah, like I do tend to think that, well, yeah, of course, some degree of this alienation is necessary, and it's already included in what we are. Like, we kind of went into it in our reading where we were like, well, before we really sat down and read this, we were going with Homo faber. And then when we got to the part about species being, Dave really drew out the spiritual nourishment element. But that doesn't erase Homo faber. That doesn't erase the fact that we operate on the world around us. And that is true. And I think that's a fair point to raise, Rudy. And it's like, we have to be careful when we're dealing with this, because there are people who will make that leap from saying some alienation is necessary to, let's just turn it to 11 and ride this motherfucker till the wheels fall off. We don't want that. We don't want to fuck with people who do want that.
Yeah. Well, we'll fuck a little bit. Like a speed date with like a one night stand, like that kind of fucking we're with, maybe we won't call them back, but no, we'll have a little intercourse, in the figurative sense, mostly figurative. For me, 100% figurative. I'm married, everybody. I'm taken. But you can all fuck with, the single TU boys as much as you all want, to your heart's desire. See, when Nance mutes himself and then he laughs and then I laugh, I sound like I'm just laughing in a room by myself.
Laughing at yourself.
Yeah, stop me. I'm laughing because I see you laughing, but then I sound crazy. That's what you're doing. Don't mute yourself, man. Yeah, there we go.
Well, then it would just be one constant laugh track, dude. Like, we're serious. People listening, we're not complete idiots. We take this shit seriously. It's just also enjoyable for us, and we like to laugh, and we're not stuck up dickheads. We're not just scholastic fucking fuckwads. We laugh when something is funny, right?
How'd you do that? It's actually, I'm not even mad.
Okay. So, all right, yeah. We're about to roll the thing, but we had alluded here to the courses. So in this, I make this, connection to the lecture that Benjamin Studebaker gave recently at Theory Underground. And that was for a group that meets monthly on the fourth Sunday of every month. But it's not happening on the fourth Sunday of April because, Nance and I are leaving for the European tour at the end of the month. So yeah, very exciting. Very exciting. I actually am kind of freaking out. I'm not actually sure like how I'm going to survive, like the next couple months. So I just, the way forward is always just not to think about it, Don't worry about it. Just focus on one thing at a time and keep your head down. But like when I think about the fact that we're about to fly over the ocean and come into your neck of the woods there, Rudy, it's like, oh wow, we don't even have like almost anything ready for that. So, I guess I want to say a couple things about that first, in that, the event in Paris as well as the events in, Brussels are closed events. They are salons. They are small scale, 20 people max. And so you have to get a hold of me if you want to be a part of those. And, there's not going to be ticket sales or something like that where you can like go sign up for it. No, I have to know you. Like this is not a random thing. And if you're like Sab, who was in the live chat the other day saying, hey, we've been following your stuff for 2 years, blah, 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 shout out. Well, then cool. That's sufficient, but you got to introduce yourself. It's not going to be this cold call, just get a ticket randomly kind of a thing. And, so there will be other events along the tour that are also kind of booked out. And so, get to the front of the line. Some of them you can actually get a ticket RSVP. Most of them aren't ticketed. And so it kind of is just like, you got to know. And a lot of this is word of mouth. It's very underground. And, if it wasn't for the local organizers making it happen, we wouldn't be there. And so I'm really excited to hopefully get most of the local organizers together in one Zoom call, for the Epic Livestream Marathon, the last one of spring season that will be happening before we go to Europe. And that one is happening on April 18th. And at this point, I can tell you about a few of the conversations that are going to happen. One, I am going to be having a conversation with Anne, and we're going to be talking about C-M-T and CDT, Critical Media Theory and Critical Doxology and Timenergy, which are the two seminars that go on every month on the second Sunday and fourth Sunday, respectively. And I'm going to be interviewing Michelle Garner, Daniel Garner's wife, the partner of OG Rose. They both do the writing for OG Rose. And so this will be her first time officially on the channel, though she's kind of been around. And so that's very exciting. And then also interviewing Benjamin Studebaker and talking to him about his educational journey. And the whole through line of this stream is learning and contradiction. For some people, it'll be very clear how learning and contradiction relate. For other people, it'll be very focused on learning. And in some cases, contradiction will be kind of the whole point, as it will be for the conversation between Spencer Leonard and Matt McManus, which will be an hour and a half. And that's going to happen. Yeah, guys, that's happening because I interviewed Matt McManus and then Spencer Leonard came on right afterwards and disagreed in a whole bunch of different ways. And it's like, cool, well, let's do it. And guess what? Same thing is happening with Spencer Leonard's homie, Chris Catrone, our Marxist father. He is going to be coming on here to talk with Todd McGowan. And that's never happened on the internet. Yeah, Rudy, say something.
Man, I didn't know that. That's fucking amazing. I really I listened to so much of Catrone's stuff lately, and I was like, damn, I was searching the internet. This is not even bullshit, people. I'm not like hyping this up for real. I'm for real right now. Like, I was like, shit, he never talked to Todd McGowan. That's awesome. Man, that's awesome. I hope they go into the weeds.
Well, and I've wanted to do this conversation now since, when was it? I mean, actually, how long ago? It was 2022 is when I was interviewing.
Yeah, it was at least 2 years ago. It was at least 2 years ago.
Prior to Theory Underground. I was still Theory Plebe at that time.
You were still Theory Plebe. I remember. Yeah. I was in my Buick. It was before I had my Volvo. I was in my Buick doing DoorDash, listening to Chris Catrone shit on Lacan.
Dude, yeah, and rightfully so within a limited degree, because I think there's a lot of bullshittery that's just kind of it's just academics doing their thing, and of course that's annoying, but it's not bullshit with Todd McGowan. And what Catrone essentially said, oh, and I have it right here. I'm going to put it on the screen here so if people can actually see it for a second, because I think it matters that you can all see the video and how to go look it up yourselves if you want to go do a little homework here. Let's see. Rudy and Nancy will not be able to see this, but everyone else will be able to see it. So if you go back on my channel far enough, at some point there, you'll find this. So, oh, come on. Oh, it's sitting there lagging out. If you go to the very bottom of my live videos, you'll see this one right here. What, why, and how Lenin plus Adorno, featuring Chris Catrone. It has 4.8 thousand views. And it says that it was streamed 1 year ago, but it was over a year ago at this point. And at the end, he says, don't waste your time with, Adorno. In fact, or sorry, not Adorno. Don't waste your time with Lacan. Is it timestamped? Do we have it timestamped? Which I'm going down really quick here to see if it's, I don't see the clip being timestamped. Oh, well, whatever. It's right here. And then the following day, we did this, young Žižekian, response, right? And so, I mean, the young Žižekians was a tongue-in-cheek ad hoc idea. It's a loose association of individuals. This video starts out with, me playing the clip where Catrone is saying it.
I don't know, the Proud Boys, like, save your ejaculations to save your vital masculine energy, right? Like, to me, that's no more or less valid than Lacan is, right? And it's all kind of bullshit.
So of course I face palm, and then I say, oh no, man, like, get the fuck out of here with that. And he laughs and we have a good conversation or whatever, but we brought on McGowan the following day. Both of them said they were down to have a conversation to me. But I didn't take them up on it at first because I wasn't in a hurry, because I think that contradictions need to be approached deliberately and in an even keel way if we actually care about learning from them. And they both didn't really know me yet. And Theory Underground was just an idea. And so now that Theory Underground is established, and they've each been on the channel 2 to 3 times since then, and now they're both teaching courses at Theory Underground this year, the time is now. And so the fact that they're down to both have this conversation is amazing. And that's the main, probably, like, I would call that like the feature event. It's the one that's going to draw the most interest from everybody. So I hope that people will be nice, more or less. I know there's a bunch of like fanboys on both sides who can kind of be a little obnoxious. And so we're hoping that people will bring their best selves into that conversation. And that's what I'll be trying to model. With that said, I will also be having a conversation with the Solitariat, and we'll be talking about our political journeys and how we disagree with one another in some essential ways, but also it's a process. It's a journey. We're fellow travelers on that journey, and we're just trying to figure our shit out because he's made quite the arc himself, having left the IMT last year. And I've made quite the arc myself. And so lots of contradiction conversations that day. And then we're off to Europe. And, so yeah, if you want to get involved with the stuff that's happening on the back end with all of these, seminar lectures with critical media theory and critical doxology and Timenergy, the best way to get involved is to become a subscriber. If you don't want to get involved with more of that stuff and you already have way too much content coming at you from the free end, which most of you do, and you just want to support the free side on both podcast and YouTube, become a patron. And the thing is, the quality of the stuff on the front end wouldn't be as good if it wasn't for these closed, more intimate, more focused, kind of slightly more private, lecture course kind of things going on. Nancy and Rudy, do either of you want to say anything about the subscriptions, CMT, CDT, the Epic Marathon live stream, anything like that? Oh, while I let you think about that, I'll say one other thing, and that is that on April 12th, there's going to be another Epic Marathon live stream all day long, but that one is the reading of this book, This Life by Martin Hagelin. And everybody who has shown their face on this channel in the past is welcome to come back and read a section of this book with me at some point throughout the day. And it's kind of just be like, we're all going to be taking turns. And I've already got like 6 or 7 people lined up, but you know, some of them are only coming for a half hour. And so there's plenty of slots available for someone like you, Rudy, or for someone like Theo or Karim or anybody who's been doing any of the readings. If you want to get in on it, just DM me and I can add you to the schedule as soon as we figure out your availability. Okay, with that said, do either of you have something you wanted to say?
Sorry, I was eating gummy bears. No, I'm super excited for both the 12th and the 18th. I think I mean, yeah, you said it all. Like, there's exciting stuff going on. And it's got like some internet like sensibilities. Oh, it's this person versus this person. But it's also, yeah, this is a platform, I guess, or a channel or whatever it is, however you think of it, that does care more about like taking shit seriously. So yeah, there's going to be some sensational conversations happening, but I do trust that, as Rudy said, they are going to get into the weeds more than they would on maybe some other more sensational platform. And that is because all of the intentional spaces that go on that aren't freely available to everyone do like vastly increase the standards for what does make it out to everyone. All the work that goes on in the courses and in the seminars and in the reading groups and the conversations and the workshops raise the standards, raise our ability to articulate the questions we have and the problems we have. And yeah, I think obviously I think it's noticeable to me, but I do think it's noticeable to people who aren't already convinced as well. So I hope to see everybody there, because I can see through your screen. I have that technology. But no, yeah,
he's also got all your data, by the way.
Yeah, I have all your data. No, it's cool. I love doing the live streams. Everyone in chat, I hope to see you there. I hope you say something cool, and I hope you don't get too distracted talking about irrelevant bullshit. I hope you guys can stay focused on what's happening on the platform, because there's a lot of care, a lot of intentionality that goes into it on Dave's part, but also like the people that come, Todd McGowan and Chris Catrone, don't want to be distracted by conversations about, is it ethical to suck a duck's dick? Which is, no, it's not. Like, that's a stupid question, right? But they've got better questions to ask of us or of each other.
Actually,
actually,
ethics is a purely
have
human
you seen
thing.
a duck's? Yeah. Have you seen a duck's penis?
I have.
Yeah.
Its
Okay.
existence is unethical. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, hop on. That's all I want to tell people. Hop on. We are trying to figure shit out. It's hard, but it's also fun. Come along for the ride.
Come along for the ride. Hey, yeah. Anyway, become a subscriber, become a patron. That's my plug. And with that, enjoy this episode. Peace. I never realized I could look where it says sending data. So it's like, that might be, this will be our experiment if I can start it like right up. All right, everybody, welcome to Theory Undergrad. We're going to see if this starts on the dot or not. I don't know. Might be the new solution. But this is going to be lecture 2 by Sahil Kumar on Das Kapital, volume 1. This will be some more on chapter 1, and I think we'll be getting into chapter 2 as well. And so without further ado, please put your hands together, figuratively, literally, whatever, for Sahil. Welcome, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave, and everybody else present. Let's sort of jump in. But so today's plan for me, what I was thinking was like both jump in and sort of move ahead, but also at the same time taking a few steps back again. So like I will be going into again, some things in chapter 1, which I did not go into last time, but yeah, we'll do some of that, and then from that we'll go forward into chapter 2. So I guess partly the idea is like, you maybe, I talked a lot about in the previous lecture, I talked a lot about, the starting point, mostly really, and then establishing from there the three very important primary categories that Marx is working with, right? So what I'll do right now is sort of do a quick kind of refresher summary of, okay, these are the things that we talked about and how that connects with what I want to focus on a little bit today in the first chapter, and from there, establishing its connect with the second chapter, right? So like last time we started with, okay, the givenness of the idea that for Marx it's an important notion that it's the social being that determines thought, right? So it is how we experience, how we think, how we interact with things. It's already within a given social sort of totality, right? Now, and that we know to be in the current situation, we know that one to be a capitalist social being, and so we are already located within that. And insofar as we are within that, this world that exists, the social being, its character, its nature is that of every element being in a commodity form, right? That the commodity form is this most fundamental elementary form of everything that exists. And everything, I'm also saying everything that exists, because it's not simply because when he says wealth is pretty much an undefined term, although I mean, he says it in one part, and I'll go into that too. In the first chapter itself, he will at one point, he'll actually explicitly say that so labor is not the sole or the only source of all wealth. He says that in the first chapter, right? So because he's talking about material wealth, and that which then he'll say, which basically goes into constitute use value, essentially, right? But what I'm saying is more than simply just that. So the commodity form is also, because it is also the form of human beings in capitalism, right? Because we ourselves also become commodities, right? Or our potential, our power, our capacity to work, labor, to produce, all of that is already gets commodified. Now, of course, this is already, I'm already saying this is all in a sense assumed, even though he's not, of course, departing off of that explicitly, but this is all assumed in the statement that, in the capitalist, in the societies where capitalist mode of production prevails, right? So, okay, so that's where we are beginning. Now, the thing is, okay, and then from there, I also, we talked about how, okay, these are the primary categories. There's use value, which is the qualitative, say, side of things. Again, it's not only qualitative, but it's qualitative in the sense that, it is qualitative singularities, right? It's material singularities which are incommensurable. They cannot, simply based on their material qualities, they cannot be made, commensurable, because how you, as we saw with the example of the iron and the, with the weight. So we need this common property which will serve as the basis for, okay, the two things that you are measuring, right? So, but materially, all the infinity of material use values that exist do not have that common material property by themselves, which could allow them to be exchanged. So that is the moment. But and this is the point where, which is for Marx, it's not, it's not a thought abstraction. It is not an abstraction that we are doing in thought, which, even though he'll demonstrate that we, deductively essentially arrive at that when we, deduce from this fact that two incommensurable commodities are exchanged. So we can deduce from that the fact that, okay, that there must be a third, secret quality to it, a third substance, which is what is allowing, which both of them possess, and that is what allowing this, this exchange between the two, right? But the thing is, precisely because it is not a thought abstraction, but a real abstraction, because this is an abstraction that is happening in practice, right? Because as soon as we do this exchange, we have already, irrespective of if we are cognizant of this or not, of this fact, irrespective of that, it is a practical result, right? That there is this common substance, common quality produced, which is abstract human labor, right? Or, I mean, value in that moment. And then we deduce from it, concrete different labors. And then from there, equally, just like we saw this dual character in the commodity, we see the same dual character in the labor that constitutes it, right? So from qualitative, incommensurable, singular material properties, we derive this universal common substance, right? This universally exchangeable, abstract human labor or value, right? So this is the side of qualitative equalization, right? So as qualities, everything has been equalized. And then we move to that third moment, which is the quantitative differentiation, where now precisely because qualitatively all things have been equalized, then all these things can stand in a relation of quantitative differentiation. Okay, how much weight does one have in relation to the other, right? In the same sense, how much value does one have in the relation to the other, right? So now that is the moment of the exchange value, where it is exchange value is that quantitative, purely quantitative relation whose quality, whose substance lies in value, whose substance lies in abstract labor, right? Okay, so these are broadly the things that we sort of went over last time. Now, what we haven't gone over around this is partly this is one way to get at also, in a sideways sort of to address the, debate between, okay, labor theory of value or the value form side of things. The point, what I want to basically say is, okay, or another way to put this same question is in terms of, okay, so is this, has Marx written a book on, is this a book of or on political economy, or is this a book, a critique of political economy, right? Is this, Smith or Ricardo 2.0, or is it also a critique, right? So the point is that this is both. And which is also to say this is both a labor theory of value and value form, in a sense, analysis. The point, what does that mean? Because labor theory of value, or labor as the sole source of value, and again, when I say this, now remember, value is not wealth. Value is not identical to wealth as such, right? So we are also, along with Marx, we are saying labor is not the sole source of wealth, but we are saying labor is the source of value, or abstract labor, right? And again, this is abbreviation. Every time if I say labor, I mean abstract labor, right? Abstract labor is the source of value. Now the thing is, so abstract labor being the source of value, this is the labor theory of value, right? This is what we've identified. This is the labor theory of value. Okay. For Marx, this is real. And insofar as this is real, this is true. In the sense, this is the truth of this reality. Labor being the source of value is true in this reality. The critique, so to that extent, in fact, Marx will actually go and demonstrate how even Ricardo and the previous labor theory of value theorists were actually, to what extent they were also limited. These scientists, right? Marx calls them, these are scientists of the economy, or political economy, and which is why he maintains this distinction between vulgar political economists and the classical bourgeois political economists, right? He has more respect for which is basically Smith and Ricardo, right? Which is why, because for Marx, their approach still is approaching science. It is still more scientific than the vulgar political economists. Why is that? Because these people are at least both looking for and are able to actually find that the essence behind the appearance of all these exchange values and how are these money and all of these things are functioning. These people have been able to sort of at least get at this labor that is behind all this appearance. The problem now, and however incompletely, right? So of course Marx will then go and for example, Ricardo did not distinguish between, abstract and concrete labor, or labor power versus, labor as such, or a lot of these things. So which is something, again, all of these things Marx will sort of make this scientific analyses of this reality more rigorous, right? He'll definitely do that. But at the same time, so labor theory of value is true in this reality. What is untrue is this reality itself, right? That is the critique side of things for Marx. So he is saying, on the one hand, that yes, in societies where the capitalist mode of production prevails, labor is the source of value. However, this state of affairs, this reality itself, and capitalist society itself, this is not truth of human existence, right? That which, for example, for even the scientific classical political economists, for them this was the eternal sort of truth of human society, right? Or labor theory of value was this kind of an eternal truth about value, or human practice and everything. That is where Marx will be like, no. And this is precisely what he's demonstrating throughout this first chapter, right? Especially that third section where he's demonstrating how value comes to acquire. So which is okay, so this third section, which is this Marx's demystification of the money form, right? He's demystifying this magical, mysterious, dazzling money form, which has confused all thinkers previously. Is like, okay, we need to disenchant, in a sense, this thing, money, by following, okay, how does it even emerge? Like, how do we even arrive at this? And this process is a historical process. It is both logical and historical, right? Because it is, so in the sense, it is not historical to say, it is not an eternal, transcendental, whatever fact of humanity that, okay, labor is value, and value, money represents that, whatever, all of those things, right? So through that, through the development, this is what Marx is demonstrating. And in that, now, okay, I'll get to that. So in that third section, what I want to, I'll just highlight, sort of flag this for the moment, and then we'll take another step back and come back to it. In that third section, if you remember, in one of our earlier discussions, we were, slightly discussed the three peculiarities that Marx talks about in that third section. So why that is important, we'll come to that again. But now, what I want to sort of at the same time now demonstrate is how this whole first chapter, all the, the section 1, section 2, dual nature of the commodity, dual character of the labor, and then the, value form, exchange value, its analyses. And then we get to this fourth section, which is the section on fetishism, right? What I want to sort of also try to demonstrate today is how all those three previous sections are basically already this development of that fetishism. What that is precisely is, so the capitalist world, or this capitalist social being that we are part of, and we are trying to sort of both scientifically understand, this world is an abstract world. This is not a world of concrete living human beings or living things. It is what we are actually, the world that we are actually immersed in. It is an abstract world. What that means, and this is precisely why, or in Marx's other words, he would say it's an inverted world. There is an inversion happening, and again, this goes to the point about the commodity fetishism. Commodity fetishism isn't simply just like this inversion that is happening in our eyes in a certain sense. No, it is the world that we are looking at that is itself inverted, right? Now, how does this function? This inversion is precisely this abstraction, right? And which is what, again, throughout this, when we are looking at this real abstraction involved in the exchange of commodities, and through that, this production of this abstract quality, which is abstract human labor, or this value, which is, on the side of commodities, which is present in all of these things. Now, this 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 is an abstract substance, right? And not only is this an abstract substance, it is possessed by all these concrete things, right? Not only is this an abstract substance, it is embodied, it is present in all of these things. And now, in fact, when we think of this abstraction in this way, that, okay, this abstraction happens in a certain sense in thought, when we can only make sense of it if we assume this, this abstraction, then this is something pertaining to thought. But when we are in reality, when these things are happening, right, there is this abstract substance produced, which then is, and this is the inversion that Marx throughout that third section, right, from the simple form of the commodity. And then, so what Marx said there, if you remember, right, Marx at one point said there is this, so in the relation between the relative form of value and the equivalent form of value, what we have is really the externalization of a contradiction which is internal to the one single commodity itself, right? Which is, what is that contradiction? The contradiction internal to the one commodity, it is the contradiction between use, value, and value, which is the, qualitative singularity as against, qualitative equalization, right? This contradiction presents itself as an external contradiction as soon as one commodity, the linen looks at the coat, right? And how does that happen? Because when linen looks at the coat, or even before finding the coat, the problem is that unless linen finds some other material, physical, use value thing in front of it, linen cannot express its other side in its with the relation to itself, right? Marx said, like, linen, 20 yards of linen equals 20 yards of linen. That all it tells me is that it is 20 yards of this use value. It does not help me express the value, which is precisely the point of, relating to those other commodities, right? So to relate to other commodities in terms of to see what is my value as different from my use value, I need a different body, right? A different material body, which then I find in the material body of the coat, right? Now, so what happens there is, now the physical material body of the coat performs the role of the value of linen, right? So the body, the material, this is the material body of the coat becomes this simple, the first form of value, right, for the value of linen, right? Now, in this relation, and which is the same which happens in relation to labor, right? Even with labors, okay, tailoring and weaving, both of them, when they relate to each other, it turns out, so the material body of any, or the material act, the concrete, sensuous, natural form of that labor, no longer remains its own appearance, in a sense, does not remain primary anymore. It becomes only the mode of manifestation of the abstraction, which was the abstract labor, or in the case of the commodities, the physical body of the coat becomes merely the form of manifestation of that abstract thing. So what we discover in all of this is, so there is this in Marx, before, like editing, especially with the second edition of Kapital. In the first German edition of Kapital, he had his first chapter really officially did not have, this exact same structure. And he did talk about, simple form of value and even the commodity fetishism and everything, but not in as much detail, as it did not expand on them as much. And especially a lot of these steps of the third section, which is on the value form, he put this at the end of the book in the form of an appendix. And there he uses this one way to say this, which I like still, even though the exact, words I think did not make it to the, later editions, but he talks about precisely this inversion where he says, I'll quote from that here now. So he says, within the value relation and the value expression included in it, the abstractly general counts not as a property of the concrete, sensibly real, but on the contrary, the sensibly concrete counts as the mere form of appearance or definite form of realization of the abstractly general. The labor of tailoring, which, for example, hides in the equivalent coat, does not possess, within the value expression of the linen, the general property of also being human labor. On the contrary, being human labor counts as its essence. Being the labor of tailoring counts only as the form of appearance or definite form of realization of this essence. This quid pro quo is unavoidable because the labor represented in the product of labor only goes to create value insofar as it is undifferentiated human labor, so that the labor objectified in the value of the product is in no way distinguished from the labor objectified in the value of a different product. This inversion, by which the sensibly concrete counts only as the form of appearance of the abstractly general, and not on the contrary the abstractly general as property of the concrete, characterizes the expression of value. Right? So, I mean, what he's saying is, in this whole thing, in a world where all, all wealth, all commodities, and now wealth is including not only these use values, but also the labor that went into it, right? Or what we can say is, okay, insofar as all wealth in the sense of material wealth or use values are or have become or appear as take the form of appearance of commodities, then obviously all the labor that went into it has also taken that form, right? It is also, in a certain sense, commodified or abstracted. Let's call it abstracted and not exactly commodified, right? So all the labor itself. And what is labor? What labor really is life activity. It is our living that we do to reproduce our life, right? All the labor that we do is to produce use values precisely to go on, to reproduce ourselves. So all that life activity has become abstracted. Now, as a result of this abstraction, now what all these material, things or material substances, material singularities, which is use values or concrete labor or concrete life activity, once all of them have acquired this abstraction and are now the bearers, right? Now they are literally the trigger, right? The bearers of this abstract substance. This abstract substance becomes, in a sense, more real than their material bodies themselves. All those material bodies, all those physical, practical activity, life activity itself now merely functions as the form of manifestation, only an expression of this abstraction. So this abstract reality or this abstract thingness that all these, all the commodities, whatever use values are now, carrying around with them, right? This abstract thingness that all things have a part of, as, they have this as a part of them, or this abstract thing that all human activity is, possesses. That is the real world now. That is the reality in which we, live and we participate, right? And in this world, so what does all this abstraction, this presence, real presence of this abstract world, which is, which is composed of things whereby even human activity itself acquires a thing-like character. What this means is, what ends up happening here is that those things, just like, physical things, just like physical things have their own laws of motion and, follow their own law-like movements, human life itself and all products of human life themselves, acquire this thingness, this thing-like quality, this abstract quality, and so human life in its now objectified form acquires laws of motion of its own, right? So this is the process through which human life, and this is basically what we are talking about right now, is the process of alienation, which is the process of alienation for, for Marx, in the more, say, in the matured form of Capital, whatever, right? What he's demonstrating here now through the critique of political economy. And again, this is the moment where this is the point at which lies the critique side of things, right? So he acknowledges the scientific, validity of political economy to the extent that, yes, to the extent that all human activity remains objectified, and to the extent that these objects have now acquired an existence, almost this autonomous independent existence, and to that extent they have relations with each other and they move, so there are economic laws. To that extent, political, classical bourgeois political economy is doing good. It is, it is sort of whatever, scanning, tracing these laws of motion of this objective world, right? What it is not looking at, right, what it is totally oblivious of, is the fact that what does appear, what has taken this appearance or this real form of objects in this world, and which is in fact, so this lawful, law-like movement of this objective world, to which not only these objects are, subservient to, subject to, but also humans themselves become subject to, right? This world really is this inverted world, where it is not like in its genesis, in a sense. So, or rather, the genesis of this objective world is the human, right? The result, this objective world, right, is the result of human activity, and yet this relation gets inverted, right? And that is precisely capitalism. In capitalism, where we are, ruled by, we are dominated by, we are determined by this objective world, right, which is really the result and production of our activity, our practice, but a practice of abstraction. Right? It is a practice of abstraction which produced this, and then in turn ends up commanding, our own being in that sense, right? So now, so what I wanted to sort of point out in this chapter is this is basically Marx's, and so in his the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, Marx says that all criticism has to sort of begin with a criticism of religion, right? For Marx, like criticism of religion, he considered that like it's important. And sorry, and then Feuerbach does do that, right? Feuerbach wrote this critique of Christianity, the essence of Christianity and everything, and that's sort of what everybody sees in Marx too, that he hasn't totally gotten rid of, which is this Feuerbachian anthropocentrism, anthropology, sort of, right? And Feuerbachian anthropology is still present in Marx. That's what we see in the early economic and philosophical manuscripts, where Marx's deployment of the notion of alienation is really that same one, and in which what Feuerbach is really doing is saying that, right, that this being, the supreme being, God, is really this externalization. This is just a projection of the man's alienable, or has been all these attributes of man that have been alienated into and externalized into this being called God, and then we come to be to be subject to this external entity, right? Exactly. We bow down to our own creations, right? And this is precisely, if you remember, I mentioned that preface of the German ideology, where Marx talks about how all these German philosophers are thinking about okay, men have had until now these crazy ideas about things and themselves, and then have bowed down to their creations. And for us, the task is to teach men to look at reality correctly, and this false reality will fall down, right? So now so again, Marx's task here is this twofold, in a sense, task. It is really, and then my claim here is that what he is doing with Capital is actually his critique of religion. This book is also a criticism of religion. It is a criticism of heaven, as Marx called it, right? It is a critique of theology of metaphysics, because precisely and this is why, like, these seemingly random, remarks that Marx makes in this book of economy, like that sounds weird, that looks off a little bit, right? It's a book of economy, like, okay, apart from just these literary sort of flourish, they don't seem, that important, or at least they seem like this external, aspect, right? But no, the point precisely is because what he's demonstrating in the critique of economy, in the critique of the secular world, he's demonstrating the presence, or its foundations are metaphysical, are theological, right? So Marx's critique of political economy is also at the same time his critique of religion. And this is, so now when we look at, this the three peculiarities where Marx says, okay, the in the equivalent form, the physical body of the coat becomes only the manifestation of value, right, of this abstract substance, where the concrete labor of tailoring or weaving becomes only the manifestation of, abstract labor, right? And private labor, social labor, or sorry, private labor becomes the form of social labor. These three peculiarities. Now, what he's really talking about precisely is this inversion, and this is you can see, sure, if you want, the criticism or the charge of this, continuation between Feuerbach and Marx, that yes, Marx is demonstrating how this inversion is happening, whereby this alienated life, this alienated world, right, comes to dominate, or, this inversion happens, right, where real life activity ends up becoming subservient to, or, subject to this abstract, ideal, metaphysical existence, a metaphysical being, right? What is this? What is the substance of value? What is what is this abstract labor? So now the difference, however, between Feuerbach and Marx lies here, that for Feuerbach, it was almost like a given that what human is, what this abstraction. So for Feuerbach, the alienation is God, that is the abstraction, but of human. What Marx demonstrates is also that even the category of the human itself is already an abstraction. That, right, that it isn't so. And in that sense, to that extent, Marx's critique of Feuerbach, or what we can say here is, so Marx's critique of political economy is the same as Marx's critique of religion and his critique of, Feuerbachian sort of critique of religion. Because what Marx is demonstrating is at the same time that even this human, which is taken to be the source of all, all false ideas or of value, right? So labor as the source of all wealth, right? So, and this is so, in the critique of Gotha program, that's where Marx says this most, emphatically or explicitly. Of course, that was not meant for publication, but in this chapter, in the first chapter, he only says this, in this one sort of line, where this idea for Marx, that labor is the source of all wealth, this idea is pure bourgeois ideology, right? This for Marx is a purely bourgeois notion. And now, precisely because for Marx, no, labor is not this some all-producing substance in itself, by itself, right? No, labor and nature sort of, together, and which is, labor itself a force of nature, right? And that produces wealth, right, for Marx. And in the same kind of way, it is human practice and not this some sort of abstractly given human substance or human something, which is the source of even its own alienation. No, even the human itself is produced as a result of this real abstraction, right? Even so, the ideology of humanism, right? Humanism as an ideology or as a philosophy itself, emerges in the intellectual history at a certain historical moment, right? That, okay, human is the, the fundamental anthropocentrism in that sense only emerges historically at a certain point, precisely because abstract human labor or abstract human as a result of this real practice, a real practice of real abstraction, this already acquires a certain, universality at this certain historical moment. That is precisely why we get, notions of the human as such, man as such, man in the abstract. And then that is the point at which, somebody like Feuerbach can actually even come to this realization, or this critique that, okay, God is really an alienation or an abstraction of the human. But what Marx is then demonstrating, going a step further, is that this man itself, what is this, man? That itself is this, abstraction, right? So it is the concrete living practice, living life, which then becomes abstracted and takes on this metaphysical, ideal sort of a existence. And then this metaphysical ideal substance then comes over to rule, what we are, and how we do, and then how we labor. So therefore, right, so even though value is the result of the abstraction of concrete labor and concrete practice, and yet once value has acquired its, thinghood, and its existence and its own laws of motion, real labor, real concrete labor, then has to abide by the laws of value, right? Even though value, the substance, this equivalence or abstract labor. So now, once abstract labor has been produced, all concrete labor, now if you do any job, or whoever, any of us do any concrete job, it has to abide by the laws of, abstract labor. Otherwise we are just wasting our time, you know right? So my activity is now controlled and, regulated essentially by this abstraction, right? So one major point, and then of course now everything that I'm just saying, this is basically, that fourth section on the fetishism of commodity, right? What is this fetishism of the commodity? This is precisely this fetishistic character of our real world itself, right? It isn't simply this fetishism, which is just one way we can, think about then fetishism. Okay, there is, let's think of this in, sort of multiple levels. So one level is simply, this first level of ideology, first level of, fetishism, where we just assume that, any given commodity has or value is somehow inherent in it, right? Value is just like its, weight, just like its any of these physical qualities. Value is also its own quality. Okay, that's the first level. Then, somebody like classical bourgeois political economists will come around and they will point out that, okay, no, that value is not some natural property, some mystical natural property of the thing itself. It comes to the things from labor, right? But then this is still fetishism, because we cannot simply step out of this fact, right? The fact that, okay, labor or abstract labor is the substance of the value of these commodities, right? This fetishism, this level of fetishism, is already that fact which is structuring our real world, right? This is what makes our current reality real. It makes what our, current reality is itself, right? So so even at that point, simply revealing, removing the veil, sort of, in that sense, isn't enough. And this is the point where then, so philosophers have merely interpreted the world, right? Philosophers can demonstrate to you that, okay, labor is the source of, value in this world. But the point is to really, to in that sense, to know it, to transform it. So because you can interpret the reality of this, or you can interpret the truth of this reality, but you cannot, find truth as such simply through this interpretation. To acquire truth, to reach truth as such, you need to actually transform reality, right? So yeah, I guess now in all of this, so what we have is a critique of religion, a critique of theology. And See, the object, the thing coming to, dominate my thoughts. Okay. Now, that's the other thing, and I'm sort of okay. Yeah. So in this through the existence of this abstract world that now determines our thought and our activity and everything, what this means is, in this world, as this abstract substance value, or this abstract abstract labor that now dominates real living self activity, real life activity, this becomes what I'm talking about here is basically the continuation of how capitalism. We know, obviously, capitalism is a continuation of class society, right? But A, that this is still a class society, and B, how class struggle or class antagonism, class oppression functions within this society, right? Because we know, and Marx also pointed out in previous class societies, it was class domination functioned through direct social relations, right? The like class domination was explicit in that sense, right? Or if there was a mediation, it was mediation through religion or those kind of things, but it was in terms of social relations, it was explicit. Okay, right? In this world, what is now happening is, nobody in that sense, because we are all equals. Formally, we are all equals. Formally, there are no longer classes in that sense, right? Or, yeah. What we have now is this impersonal mode of domination, right? This impersonal and abstract mode of domination. And what is that abstract mode of domination? So what is value, or what is abstract labor? Value or abstract labor is basically the ability, or the possibility, or the medium through which labor is enforced, labor or work is imposed on anybody, right? Like, why, how? So in capitalism, to impose labor on somebody, you no longer need, primarily at least, you no longer need the whip or anything, right? What you need, so domination itself becomes rational, right? So domination in this capitalist world is is rational domination. So this is a world where violence, or direct state intervention, or any of those things, precisely because they are, and generally that's what they are system reinforcing violence, right? To sustain and to maintain the system. So that violence itself is no longer irrational, even though, of course, in the world of rationality, any such act appears as irrational, but such irrationality itself, its foundations themselves are rational. And this is basically the point, we're getting a little ahead of myself, but how Auschwitz, or the fascism itself, can be seen as not an aberration from the rational world, but only a logical conclusion of this rational world, right? That this rationality, which is already the rationality of labor, right? Labor, as labor will set you free, or whatever, this is precisely the rationality of this world. And what I want to essentially highlight, because my claim is, this is everything that is coming out of, or this is in this first chapter, is precisely because what this first chapter is talking about is about how an abstract world comes into being, right? Through what procedure, what practice, right? How this abstract world comes into being, and how then, as a result of this, how it comes to acquire rationality, acquire a logical movement of its own, as if independent of human. So now we can, irrespective of how we might come together and think about, yeah, we should all, it would be better if we all live together in nice, peaceful ways, and yet somehow we end up, fighting, because there is a law-like character now to human existence, right? Because we are not really control of our own, activity. What controls our activity are these, material sort of, or object-like forces, right? This is reification, right? Reification, what is reification? Becoming thing of, of some process, right? Of some human activity, right? So again, this is that continuation, I guess, to reiterate. This is the continuation. So reification is not by itself something specific to capitalism, right? Reification has happened, human activity taking on this external alienated object like character. This has been a character of pre-capitalist societies too. Religion is one example of that, right? But what is specific to capitalism is that reification happens in capitalism through commodity fetishism, right? Through the objecthood or object-like character of commodities, which then come to rule our life. Okay. Um, I think this was mostly what I wanted to point out in this first chapter. I guess, yeah. Well, if I know you just, I mean, you already went in deeper with the third section and all also, right? But I guess one more thing that I can point to this critique of religion or critique of, the theological real, world, right? Is, so for example, what happens in this, especially in that relation, which is the, character of money, and or money as this, representative or manifestation of the logic of value, right? What we have here, and this whole relation between, relative value and, equivalent value, right? What we have here is precisely the notion or the logic of, God, right? God as this supreme abstract, formless sort of being, which is the source of all, value of every being, living or, you know um thing, material thing, or everything, right? And then every material being becomes a mere manifestation of, of God's, abstract, whatever, infinite, or, that spirit, right? We, as limited human beings, or, anything, merely becomes a manifestation. And then there are more and less of those, manifestations. So you can have, incarnations, right? Essentially what, so I mean, this is also, fun to note, right? What Marx is talking, like, when every time he's talking about the embodiment, or, congealing, right? Like, embodiment is literally incarnation, right? In, like, incarnate, right? To in the carne, or, in the body, to embody something, literally, right? So in this relation of commodities, right, what the relationship that establishes itself is the relationship, that all of these commodities are merely, in a certain sense, they take on the form of what? Of God, right? So a certain, deity, a certain smaller deity can act as a representative, or an embodiment, or an incarnation of this abstract body of God. And the peak, sort of example of that we have in the body of money, right? Money as that representative, which functions to bring all this world of, relative values, right? Money functions as that equivalent, right, which functions to bring all these other relative values into relation with each other through mediation, by itself, right? Which is already, it's only now performing the function of God, whose logic is already that of, making everything commensurable, right? Yeah. Okay. So now, from this point, now we can, just straight up jump in to the process of exchange, right? So what we are looking at, what we just looked at now, and because this is again the point that he has been highlighting, right, that the mystery of the money form is really just an, developed form of the mystery, or the contradiction that was already present in the single commodity itself. the mystery of the money form is really the mystery of the commodity itself. And now, precisely because previous whatever theorists and all were not able to properly analyze the commodity form itself, and especially the historicizing part of it, in the sense that understanding that this commodity form is not a natural form, it's not an eternal form of things, but rather it's a historical product, right? So to the extent that they were unable to identify that contradiction within the commodity itself, money remains this mystery, right? So now, as we move from seeing that the self form, the logic of money and of relations, right, between commodities, now we can enter the empirical realm, right, of how these commodities actually play their relations out. And now this is also basically the thing. So the move both from the first chapter to second and the rest of the chapters, and also with this first whole part, which is the first three chapters, and then into the thing, like these chapters really form the part of the critique, in the sense that these chapters establish that critique whereby labor theory of value itself, or this is the critique of this real world, right? But once we have the critique of the real world, in the sense that we can imagine the possibility of a free association of men, right? We can imagine that capitalism or a world based on commodity form is not an eternal shape of society. Once we have established that, then we also obviously at the same time also need to see what are the laws of this world itself, because we cannot at the same time. So it isn't also enough to simply recognize and to declare that this is a false world, right? That's also not enough by itself. We also understand how, okay, this world may be false, this world may be untrue, but it is still real, right? It still persists despite our knowledge of it. So then it is also at the same time important to understand better than the scientists, better than the classical bourgeois political economists. We need to understand this precisely because we want to change it, right? Precisely because we want to transform it, we need to understand, but how does it function in order to be able to then, to demystify it in that sense, right? So what the rest of this book, to a major extent, is precisely so. To that extent, it can also be called a book of political economy, to the extent that, of course, it is tracing, okay, yeah, how does value function? How does value function? How does money function? How does from value we get more value, right? Like this magical, self-reproducing, self-expanding substance. How does all of this magic happen? And it's happening every day, the whole time, outside in front of us, right? And if something goes wrong in the economy right now with the numbers on the stock exchange or something, I will feel the immediate effect of that right now, right? Even like in this world of numbers, in this world of abstract categories and things out there, it's a real world, it has real impact, right? Real effect on us. So that is what we then that this whole book at the same time, right, it isn't simply a critique of this world, but again, because it's not a moral critique simply put, it's not simply, oh yeah, this is bad, no, it is also a critique in the sense that it's showing its own limits, how it functions, right? And how it functions through its own limits, which are basically crises of its own manifestation, and then it tries to resolve that crises in all these ways, right? So yeah, so then what we'll now, as we move to the second chapter, right off the bat, we'll start to see in a statements which would prove right. Okay, yeah, you had your hand on.
Is it okay if we do a little
Okay.
sort of Q&A thing right before we shift into the chapter 2? Because I really love what you've done here in your recap. And I've also been thinking about how there's probably multiple ways that we can overcome the labor theory of value versus value form debate in the first place. And one of the most important questions is to ask, like, well, what's our goal and now I'm not going to totalize us here, but I'm just saying for whoever is trying to think it through, what's the goal? And you in the first place, when you'd brought up your disagreements, your concern had been that the people who bring in exchange tend to overemphasize it in such a way so that it becomes functionally the sole source of value, right? And if that happens, then obviously, all solutions are distributive solutions, which obviously I think is a fundamental issue for us as well. And so, we want a restructuring at the level of production as well. And so this is where we can all agree. And then as far as how to, whether, I guess I'm interested in how you and, Rudy and Theo, who have all already at this point written essays to one another on this topic, might be interested in revising your positions or correcting them or extending them, elaborating on them. Because at this point, I would be happy to publish the whole interaction. You could slightly, polish it, but basically in the volume I'm going to do on the value forum, people could put proper essays in there, but it would be also cool to have a, forum discourse chapter where it's like, so I would say, this is the situation. We're doing this thing with Capital Mondays at the time. And then this wild Sahil appears and he says these things and we're like, what the hell? And then blah, 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 blah. And then then he comes back and he says more and we're like, oh, this is really good. But then, now this Rudy appears and this Theo appears and here's what they say. And so I'd add this little bit of like context, but then I would be interested if you guys start thinking about that. What would be the next step? And so, on Wednesday morning, you might have got the email. You should have all got the email. There's moving day at, 9 a.m. Eastern time. And that's where we're going to be bringing over everything that's happened on the forums into the Discord, because we're getting rid of the old site for anybody who needs context. Regardless, I think it would be good to have a forum post, like a specific post, where we reproduce that discourse so far. Obviously, everyone else involved here might consider adding their own 2 cents, but the interesting question is like, yeah, where do people want to take that conversation before it were to be published, if we hypothetically publish it? Because I could see different people wanting to take it in different directions. Given the rereadings that we've done, given I'm curious, and maybe I would write something about this as well. I'm not sure, but like how Karatani actually does or does not change something, or how Pistone does or does not change something for anyone. Because I mean, with you, Sahil, you already knew Pistone, but we haven't even gotten into the relevant Pistone, not yet, with the series that we're doing. And so there's just so many different factors. Now, that's all one thing. And then I want to leave it on a question, and then I'm going to go on a run while I listen, because I have to get my workout in somehow, and I've been on screens for like 8 hours at this point. So I'm going to go on a run. But my big question to you, Sahil, and this is more directly related to your lecture today, is context. Did you see the reading we did of the rereading we did of this section, the fetishization, section 4?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Because when you said something about alienation and tied it into fetishization, I was like, it sounded to me like you were referring to my observation, which was that there's something so similar going on here. And what you're pointing out is the foil to that sort of Althusserian, that's not in there. And it's like, it's fucking right there, man. It's on the page. If you read A Strange Labor and then you read the fetishization section, it's on the page. Like, I don't know how you can unsee it after you've seen it. But I think in Althusser's defense, he hadn't seen it. I don't think he had actually seen it. But maybe not. I don't know. So, but the big question then, that was the context of the question. The question is there a significant difference between fetishization, alienation, and reification. Are these the same three? Are they speaking of the same three things in slightly different ways? And if so, what are the ways? Or are they actual different mechanisms, processes for getting at that thing? And they're like substantially different at the level of the concept or the phenomenon or the structure. I don't know. That's a big question, but thanks, man. You're doing great.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay. So should I just like begin with this and then then we continue? Does that sound good?
I'm assuming nobody else had any questions, then yeah, I would just, 100%.
All right. Okay, yeah. So, so basically reification, alienation, and fetishism, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so to that, like for me, there is, one can still think of a break between, the early Marx, whatever, the Marx of economic and philosophical manuscripts and this, Kapital Marx, right? Like one can think of the break. For me, that break only lies to the level of, that rigorosity in a certain sense, or thoroughness in terms of, that critique of political economy has not yet developed as much. For example, Marx had back then not yet, for example, come up with the term, with the notion really of labor power as different from labor, right? That is something that happens in between. Sure, like there are those things, but in terms of his understanding of alienation, now that's the thing. So because what is happening exactly is alienation gets so to that extent, in a sense, Feuerbach was also right about religion. It is a process of alienation, because alienation is, in a sense, naming one aspect of a process, which is this kind of this externalization, right? Like this sending out of this human activity. And this is how I like to think of this, right? Like so alienation is from this side of this externalization, of the sending out. And what happens when I alienate or externalize my own activity? It gets objectified, right? That is, and especially in this objectification. Now the thing is, so there is objectification in simply reproductive, whatever simple activity too, like in the sense of purely, when we think of purely labor process as such, which is different from not valorization process but labor process as such. When I think of labor in terms of metabolism with nature, right? When I think of labor in terms of production of use values, of course there is a process of objectification there too, right? One can think of that relation also as, okay, I put my living labor into that, the wood, right? And the wood, which through the interaction or through this objectification of my living labor into that wood, turned into a table then, right? Because so now the table is the result of this objectification of my living labor, right? To that extent also one can think of objectification, or one can also think of this externalization, right? But alienation is something different, because in alienation as which leads into reification, right, is something whereby now this object takes on a life of its own. That is the difference between alienation as which results in reification, and alienation simply in terms of that objectification, or just this materialization, or call it whatever, right? The result of this immediate labor process, whereby the form of the matter is changed, transformed. That is something different. That is not reification, right? So for me, now alienation in that sense, in the sense of that any human activity taking an object-like existence, and which comes on to acquire its own movement, and movement not simply independent of us in its own, like not like I acted on a stone and now it has movement because I pushed it. Not in that sense, but in the sense that the stone, because it's gold or something, has now this, as a result of human, whatever practice, has this autonomous existence and quality that it is now, it determines, what my value is, right? All of this. Now that is reification, that is objectification. Or, which is another example of that, is God, or in what happens with religion, or all whatever, all these kinds of spirituality, whereby there is this externalization in the sense of alienation of human practice into things, into this ideal substance or whatever, which then becomes this object, right? Thing which then comes to dominate human practice, right? This is reification. Now the difference between, so alienation for me is this one side of things, whose result is reification. And commodity fetishism is a very historically specific form of reification, which is how reification happens in the capitalist world, right? Reification, things acquire, or human practice acquires a thing-like character which comes to dominate human practice through the form of the commodity, right? Through becoming value, right? Becoming this alienated abstract. So for me, what value or what abstract labor is precisely, it is alienated labor, right? Abstract labor is already alienated labor, or rather, what I sometimes call it as alienable labor, right? Because labor becomes alienable precisely because it has been abstracted, right? So now, in its abstract form, it is basically, one can steal in labor in the form of time itself, right? Labor time itself, in a sense, can be stolen, right? So fetishism is this historically specific form of reification. That's how I think of, alienation, reification, and that. Okay. Should I then jump in? All right. Perfect. So okay. So now, right? So now we are, now once we have established these, categories and the logic which is already inherent in the commodity, in these things, right? Things now things are more than just the material of a commodity, right? Commodities are things now, not because of their physical material, sensuous, coarsely sensuous existence, materiality, but rather they are things because of this thing-like quality which they acquire through abstraction, right? Through value. So now these commodities, which are both things and they have their own laws and their own relationship with each other, to that extent, in this form, now these, Marx will say, these commodities cannot go to the market. Sadly, despite all these powers that the commodity has, it cannot go to the market by its own. It needs its guardians now, right? So now again, so the products of our labor come to direct, to direct and manage us, right? So we now become the guardians, the bearers, and we abide by, or we are commanded by our commodities, right? So they determine now our activity. So because they are the ones with value, we need to take them to the market, right? So that they can exchange with some other commodity. And so now I want to highlight this quote, and this is what I was sort of beginning with, by saying that, so now, you'll hear these kind of sentences which will prove, Marx's more recent, relatively recent critics correct, which is that, Marx's thing is economic determinism, So you'll hear, I'll quote this line, it's on the first page itself, right? The guardians must therefore recognize each other as owners of private property. This juridical relation, whose form is the contract, whether as part of a developed legal system or not, is a relation between two wills which mirrors the economic relation. The content of this juridical relation, or relation of two wills, is itself determined by the economic relation, right? Now, most like explicitly very economic determinist, at least to the extent that we are talking about, the juridical relations, right? Like what the legal relationships between, people are, or the legal relationships of modern world, right? Right. Okay. Right. So in the sense that what this means is, and again, so to the extent that we are merely guardians of commodities, right? We as guardians of these commodities need to have rights. No, we need to have equal rights. We need to have rights of property, because if we don't, right, because then commodities, as Marx says, commodities lack the power to resist man. Hmm? Right. So a man can just come and force, himself to take possession of those commodities, right? So then these commodities, again, to carry out their own, relationships, their own laws and everything, for that they need humans as their guardians, right? To protect them from being forcefully alienated in that sense, right? Alienated in the sense of removed, right? So to that extent, now human beings as their owners, as their possessors, need equal rights. They need rights to those properties, right? So what is represented, what comes out in these juridical relations, right? These juridical relations of, of human law in that sense, right? Law of contracts, of private property, laws of private property, all of these things, these are only reflections. This is only a mirror of all the already existing economic relations, right? Because there is already this economic relation between these commodities. This economic relation that we saw throughout that first chapter developed from within that one commodity into, externalized into these other commodities, and, arrive at the level of money, right? It is the same relation, economic relation, which is then reflected into, juridical relations, and which is why then we necessarily have this modern, bourgeois equality and bourgeois right and all of that, right? So to this, now I don't remember if you, in economic and philosophical manuscripts, at one point Marx says, at first sight it appears that, that alienated labor is the consequence of private property, but then after further, like further analysis demonstrates to us that it is exactly the inverse, that private property is the consequence of alienated labor. So alienated labor, it's not that we feel alienated from our labor, or simply that, that labor itself is alienated, my product is alienated because of this, because we have private means of, seize the means of production, like private property. So only, again, this is another mode whereby the result of this kind of an approach, thinking that alienated labor is the result of private property, simply thinks in terms of, okay, then if we were, if we were to change the juridical relation, right? Because private property in this sense is usually is this juridical relation between us guardians and our relationship to each other as, free, independent, sovereign, little sovereigns who have private property rights over our own possessions, right? This juridical relation. So if we think private property results in, or alienated labor is the consequence or the result of private property, then again we can fall into this belief that, if we can change the laws, we can change the economic relationships, right? But again, for Marx, no. This alienated labor, it's precisely what we are looking at in terms of value and abstract labor as these real abstractions, right? Though alienated labor is precisely this alienable form of labor, right, which is represented in value, right? That takes the forms of value, of money and everything. This is already the foundation of private property, right? So you cannot abolish alienated labor by abolishing private property in that sense, but rather you have to abolish this already this economic relation, right? So yeah. so again, the content of this juridical relation is determined by this economic relation, right? And then following this, for me again, and this is also Marx here, points out in the footnote, his critique of Proudhon and his idea of, ideal justice and everything, which is again, it's like this is the same, ideas. Yeah, we can, go into as you'll read this. Okay. The other thing, again, the important part in this chapter is that, so as we proceed to develop the investigation, we find that the characters who appear on the economic stage are merely personifications of economic relations. Again, now, and this is like just like what we saw with the juridical relation being a mirror of, the economic, right? And here, so these characters are merely personifications of the economic relations. This is all what we were just talking about this inversion of the world, right? Real living people merely become the masks, right? They become the character masks of the economic relations. It's like the economic relations are the real thing, right? They are more real than, the concrete use values, products, or concrete people who, perform their tasks, right? So again, that inversion is pretty much, in the center of this whole process. So now this process of exchange that we are looking at, this is basically, or rather, again, what we are looking at in this chapter is also how human relations really, now that we are in this world where the economy or the economic world is the more real, really existing world than, human relationships or anything else that we may, human collectivity. And this is precisely the point. Again, back to that thing, this economic world that is produced. Economic world is an abstract world. Human life, human collectivity is not an economic collectivity in itself. Economy, the meaning of economy is precisely this world of things which have this law-like, which is precisely why we attempt to have a science of the economy, because economy is this world of things which has this law-like, characteristic or feature. But that gets inverted, right? That becomes this alienated, objectified, abstract world becomes primary, and human lives become, it's mirrors, really. They start to mirror that economic relationship. And this is the same logic through which juridical relations are mirroring that economic relation. Human beings, or these carriers of these commodities to the market, are merely personifications of economic relations, right? And then even its own, it's the human, the guardian, the bearer of these, commodities that perform the function of, okay, that to make sure that the commodities can be exchanged and that the commodities do have, some use value, right? So that is where because the commodities cannot really, tell concrete sensuous properties of anything. That aspect has to be performed by the human through his senses or whatever, right? Because for the commodities, and this was the part that you did, focus on this in the reading, right? Where Marx says, if commodities could speak, they would say, use value may interest, men, but are the only quality, real to us as objects is their value, right? Is the value of commodities, right? Value is the true aspect, true part of us as commodities, right? That is true for commodities, and in this world, that is really what forms their, their character, right? Their character, no, their use value is irrelevant to them. The only fact about the use value that is relevant is the fact that they have some. That's it. That's all they need, right? So in that same sense, right? So now what we have in this chapter is basically then, again, it's Marx here again is demonstrating the same thing, especially that third section that we saw of the first chapter, the development of the value form. We're basically now following that same development at the level of human beings, who are now, remember, now the real act of exchange, right? This is again that relation. The empirical acts of exchange, the empirical process of exchange is now merely the making real, or the making, just performing out what is already logically true for the commodities and their relationships already, right? So now when we come to this level of, okay, how does this exchange actually happens and actually develops? This is only just the real, playing out of what is logically already internal to the commodity and how it has to play out. So what we see in this chapter is, right, how, when one person comes to the market with his commodity, for him it is, it is this relative value, which can see its own, form of value in every other use value that comes in front of us, comes in front of it, right? Which is like, if you remember, this is literally mirroring the what we saw in that third section about, relative value and finding its expanded form with every other, equivalent. Okay, 20 yards of linen equal one coat, 20 yards of linen equal these many watches, these many, something else, right, etc., etc., up to infinity, right? Then that's precisely the problem, because if this relative value has so many equivalents, and every equivalent, because materially, physically, because at this level, the equivalent, or it is a specific use value which is performing the function of the equivalent, right? It's the material body of one commodity that is performing the function of the value of my commodity. Say I have linen, right? To that extent, I do not have any single universally exchangeable, or my own commodity, even though my commodity is functioning like the general relative value for all these different commodities. There is no one equivalent, right? And this, so what Marx then says is, what happens through as over time, because the practice of exchange, it begins merely, only at the margins of societies, where, and only because for this to be real, right? And because what is already in the logic of the commodity, the fact that the relative value form, right, or the commodity that exists at the position of the relative value, for it, its use value doesn't count, right? The use value, it's only the equivalent uh, commodity whose use value will then count as the form of value. But for it, its use value is irrelevant. So the person, as the person who brings something to the market to sell, he can bring this commodity to sell precisely because its use value is not really a use value for him anymore, right? For that person. So because it is no longer a use value for me, it is a use value for others, and that is why they bring their commodities to the market. And so I will try to exchange this non-use value now with something which is a use value for me, right? So in this development, which at the beginning, what is required is production of surplus of goods that are more. I produce something more than what is needed for me, which is precisely why something can even become a non-use value for me, which is a non-use value for me and use value for somebody else, right? So first we need the production of surplus, and then that allows at the borders of the margins of societies to, things to be exchanged. But at first that relationship is accidental, and now, so what we are looking at in this chapter is precisely the relationship we looked at between commodities now being, performed in reality, in real world, by human beings, right? But human beings as these character masks, or as these personifications, or as these guardians of those commodities, so that they can perform everything that we saw in the first chapter in the real world, right? So now what is happening here is, so this quote that he does of, in their difficulties, our commodity owners think like Faust, that, in the beginning was the deed. What he's basically talking about is, so that this money form, right? This money, which is the money form, which is basically the general equivalent, right? The universal equivalent, which allows all these commodities to be exchanged through its own bodily form. This, or even its function, already becomes real. This act has already been done when as this practice of exchange becomes more and more generalized, right? The more and more this practice gets generalized, this act is already, before somebody decides or thinks that, this is a real problem, we need one commodity which should serve as, this universal, equivalent between all, and so we should call a council meeting or something and, decide on, okay, which one of these is the best material. No, the deed is already done, right? You already have arrived through this real practice at gold or silver, or at, different historical moments, at different materials, through convention, right? Through just practice, already you select one commodity as that which is already functioning, serving that function of money, right? The role of the money form. Okay. Um, Now, in this, I guess the important thing for me, this is what I would point out. Like, okay, one thing, another thing that is, so to the to this money form, right, and the substance of this money form, right? He responds about this one important thing, which is, so often it's not that how he says this, um it is not in the nature of, gold and silver to be money, but rather it's in the nature of money to be gold, or which is basically because gold and silver specifically, these two have the quality, because their quality, actually their substance, has this, potential, this power to actually be able to most adequately serve as the body for this ideal substance, right? The most abstract substance, which is value, which is like infinitely, divisible, and, because it's an ideal substance, it's all homogeneous, abstract human labor, it's homogeneous and abstract, right? Uniform. So it is only something like gold or silver which has the quality of, okay, however much how many pieces you may divide it in, or, how much small you may cut it, right? It has this uniform quality, right? So that is partly the one part of the mystery of gold and silver. The other part being that it's its function itself, and its function is precisely that function, which is the function of the value form, or the value form which is already internal to one commodity itself, and only needs to come into a relation with another commodity to come out, right? To take a external form, right? Yeah. Now for me, this, I would say, because it's also a short chapter, and really what Marx is demonstrating here is this relation through which, I guess, another thing which for me relates back to the first, chapter, is that this, at the end of this second chapter, he'll say, you know, um, men are henceforth, as we have, as we arrive at this, again, real development of the money form, men are henceforth related to each other in their social process of production in a purely atomistic way, right? Their own relations of production therefore assume a material shape which is independent of their control and their conscious individual action. This situation is manifested first by the fact that products of men's labor universally take on the form of commodities. The riddle of the money fetish is therefore the riddle of the commodity fetish, now become visible and dazzling to our eyes, right? Now, again, like what he's demonstrating in this chapter is precisely in the relations of real humans, in a sense. Again, the mystery, the fetish, or this dazzling, riddle of money, which is, again, he's demonstrating it still is really that riddle of the commodity itself, and how this fetish object takes on, this material shape, and which is independent of our control, of, men's control, and takes on a life of its own. And that a result, or what this means, is that humans are already related to each other in this atomistic way, right? Now this is the other point that I wanted to make regarding, both of these chapters, how it connects, that what we truly have as this society, or as this social totality, or society where the capitalist mode of production prevails, what we have is really not a collective in the sense, and so it is a social being that is determining consciousness, but this social being is not a collective social being. It is an aggregate of atomistic, atomized individuals, right? So, which is why it is not exactly a collective practice. It is and precisely also why it is this whole practice and its whole result, and this objectification and everything is an unconscious process, right? It's an unconscious collective practice. So we are doing this, right? That was another formulation of the fetishism, right? They do it without knowing that they're doing it, right? What is that? It is this whole materialization, this our own relations of production assuming a material shape which is independent of our control and of our individual action, right? This is precisely our own doing, right? In a sense, it is the result of our own practice, and yet we are not aware of it. It happens at the back of these actual practitioners of of this stuff, right? So yeah, I think trying to make sure if I've talked about everything that I wanted to talk about, because in the second chapter, as I see it, that's like this development of, again, the money form in its real, so he'll talk about how it's with the nomadic tribes that cattle functions earlier, because it's the most alienable form of the commodity, right, in that time, and because they have most of their possessions as alienable in the sense of removable. Let's see if we yeah, I think for me we can end here, unless and we can then get into questions and anything around that. But this would be, yeah.
Good job, man. I'm probably a good 25 minutes from the house, but it's okay. I can always have Anne go turn the recording off since she's there right now. But it would also be cool to get some little discussion before we close it out. So I'll start running home. But I want to start that by just saying one of the things about, and this, sorry, this goes, is, I'm trying to pay close attention now, thanks to everyone, to the question of the whether labor as the basis of. Hold on.
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Whether labor as the basis of value being, whether it's transhistorical or not. So yeah, I'm trying to pay attention to that as I read, and I don't have the quote ready to hand, and even when I was back at the house, I looked for it, so I couldn't find it. But Nance, maybe you marked it. I don't know, but there seemed to be a passage that sure made it sound like he was doing a transhistoricization there in the first chapter. And of course, I'm always aware that maybe he's just doing the immanent critique thing. He's just speaking as if he's a political economist as he develops it. But I guess my biggest question then is, like, are there any moments where he comes out and he really makes clear that not only does it not have to be the basis of value, but that the goal is that it no longer is? And I guess of course, I instantly go, well, if you're just going to say that it's made pretty clear that the goal is to abolish value, and then we just want to be able to have wealth. Well, and then it would be the basis of wealth. Well, I feel like that's still not going to get us out of the problem, but I guess that's kind of where I'm wondering. That's kind of where my questions are coming from. And I hope everyone else will have some questions or some points that they'll want to raise while I run home. But till then, I'm all ears.
All right. I know the passage. I don't remember again the exact page. I know it's in the first chapter. If you I don't know, if you can pull that up, that would be awesome. I couldn't. I'll try. But in any case, see. So what this is again, the trans-historicization that Marx does of, and this is one of those things we don't have another word for it, because again, what we find troublesome, what is problematic, is it's like this doubling of society and every aspect of society. It's doubling in the sense of it's like like a doppelganger kind of a effect, which is there is this production of this second realm of reality, right? And this is which is what I've been talking about, this abstract world that is almost like which is produced by our real activity, but then comes to take on a real and more real existence than our own actual activity, right? In that same kind of way, labor itself, now in that same sense, we just have this one word which has two different kinds of existence. What that means is labor itself is also, in this reality, in the capitalist reality, labor is what is the source of the problem, in a sense, right? But labor is the source of the problem in the sense that labor has become objectified in the sense it has become this external object that now commands my living labor, right? It is this dead labor that commands my living labor. That is the problem. It's this inversion of the world that is the problem. Now, labor, in the sense of my metabolism with nature, my interaction, my metabolism with, that is something Marx explicitly says is a trans-historical condition of man. Now, personally, I don't like, I would like to ask, put this back as a question to everybody. Are we really thinking of a possibility or anything whereby this physical, body, and we limit and we identify this physical body as itself, and we imagine or we claim that this body can or will, or that the utopia for us in that sense is where this body will no longer need to interact or mold or transform any material external to it, and will be self sufficient, self existing by itself without interacting with matter, with nature, in that sense. Because even if we have, say, full automation, right, those machines interacting with external or with other matter out there in the world, and that helping us survive, for Marx, that is also this material metabolism or interaction with nature. That is also labor, right? And that, I think that is that would be to think of life somehow as really that this physical body could exist without interacting with the right. Okay, let me see. So Rudy has put this quote, if this is the one. Those ancient social organisms of production are much more simple and transparent than those of bourgeois society. Individual, when he has not yet torn himself loose from umbilical cord of natural species, connection with other men, or on direct relation in by low stage. Corresponding limited relations between men within the process of creating and reproducing their material life, hence also limited relations between. No, I don't think this is the one. There is this one moment where he just says it, that this is the eternal condition, or some eternal or trans-historically, explicitly uses one of those words. And this is either the end of the third chapter or third section or the beginning. No, somewhere. It's for sure first chapter. In any case, but so my point. Okay, first of all, like, so as that, if we understand that as that labor which Marx is saying it is a trans-historical condition for existence, I don't see how one can abolish that. What we can abolish is labor as the substance of value, right? In the sense that value. So to abolish that, it is precisely basically to abolish economy, what we understand as economy. And economy, what is the meaning of economy? Economy is precisely this, this second world, this other this objective world or human activity, human productive, interactive activity, acquiring object-like existence and then having a relation between themselves as between objects and acquiring, their own spontaneous life or world, right? That is something which is the domain of value and of abstract labor, and which, then needs to be abolished to that in that sense. And that's the labor that will, that's the point of abolishing. Okay, Nance.
Yeah, it's I think I just pasted it there in the chat,
Yeah.
page 133. Yeah.
Yes. Labor as the creator of use values as useful labor is a condition of human existence which is independent of all forms of society. It is an internal natural necessity which mediates the metabolism between man and nature and therefore human life itself. Now he absolutely, Marx is very explicitly saying this is an eternal necessity, and that this is, like this trans-historical, and he will use the term even trans-historical in the 7th chapter very explicitly about this point, right? But my question is, like, to produce use values, like, this is an open question for everybody.
I think this category of the human already being an abstraction, I think I want to dig deeper into that, because I think that, yeah, that is the question. What are we? What is it that we do? Is this metabolic relationship with neighbor a necessary part of who and what we are as humans? What does that even mean to say who and what we are as humans? Yeah, and I think my answer to that is no. Like, we are necessarily in this give and take relationship. Like, we will have to expropriate our needs from somewhere. And I think, yeah, finding a way to make that not be a necessarily bad thing. But then again, I don't know, like saying, yeah, but we're already abstractions from what, like, it makes me think, oh, well, that we need to go back to Aristotle. We need to go back to Plato. Like, we need to, I don't know. It honestly, it makes me want to give up.
Okay, wait, let's see. I know Nikesh also has a question there. I want to get to that too, but okay, is that Dave? Is that you? Yeah, Dave's hands up. Had to.
Yeah. So I think the answer is kind of in the framing of the question there, Sahil, which would be to say I don't see a world where human labor is obsolete. And I would even say I don't see a world where human labor is inessential. And Nance and I both have a big red flag towards any way of talking about automation that kind of feeds too much ground to the people who drink wine and don't think about where stuff comes from, right? And I think that there is some of that in a lot of people's high hopes for automation. They say, well, my job's a bullshit job as a white collar worker, but that essential labor the proletarians do, that that can be replaced by automation, and my bullshit job can get replaced, and then we can all not do any work. And it's like, cool guy, in the meantime, the 100 to 1,000 years it's going to take to actually get there, if it was even possible, you're still going to be telling yourself that story while someone else is washing your toilet or taking out your trash, because there are simply some jobs that are not efficient to automate, including some of the technician jobs over the robots themselves. And so that's why the goal cannot be the abolition of work, period, but instead the goal has to be the redistribution of work that can't be automated, where automating the most of it possible efficiently and sustainably is the goal. And the reason I say redistributed, and of course that makes some people go, oh, it's Maoism. And I go, that's the only part of Maoism I like, actually. Yeah, I want people to have to, do some basic societal chores. I don't care if people get freaked out by that. I'm sorry, Bloomberg's children should also have to do their fair share. And that's just the way it is. Okay, but with all of that said, though, the issue isn't with the phrasing. And this is a pedantical, scholastic, issue, but it's not purely semantic. And that is, if we say, well, no, labor is not the sole source of value, it's also nature. And of course, the goal is that it's not the measure of value at all, because there's not value being measured in this sense. The goal would be that we create human wealth that is autonomously and cooperatively produced. Then I think that that's all great, but that there's like this thing that you said about how we could also say that oxygen is the basis of value. We could also say that, there's all kinds of things that we could say are the basis of value or the source of value. Or I think you used the example of power. We could say something like, oh, well, power is. But of course, there's all these different things that we can think about that do factor in. But the question is does it just factor in, or is it considered the main thing? And if labor is considered the main thing, then we haven't succeeded in making it so that a little bit of work is so amplified by the productive forces that have been unleashed, right? Like that would be the idea, is that a little bit of labor unleashes a whole, like a disproportionate sort of snowballing effect of we'll call it objectified labor, which would be like the automation. So that a little bit of human labor is making so much more that goes just way beyond what the humans are constantly on call to be doing. So that becomes like the less essential thing about our lived existences. And then so I know that's a lot. And I just want to say, like, part of the issue here is if the word labor means any and all interfacing human beings do with or on nature or between one another, meaning all thinking, all discourse, all playing badminton or something completely bougie, like all of those things are also labor. If we actually do that, then nothing I'm saying really matters. But I also hate that way of using this term. And I think we can just kind of give Marx credit for, he's doing a lot, and that's not his, that can't be his problem, but it has to be our problem, because there is a significant difference between things that you're autonomously doing for fun and things that you're doing because you actually have to pull your weight in doing the socially necessary labor. That's all.
No. Absolutely. Look, no, I don't mean that, all interaction that we do with, nature, in the sense that, yeah, even if we are playing badminton or whatever, we're, just drinking wine or whatever, it's all, the same thing as, no, of course not, right? Like, no, it is, or maybe only to the extent that maybe something like playing badminton or whatever, recreation, right? Recreational activities, to the extent that they are also important for our survival, right? Because our survival is not dependent only on physical material needs, but also spiritual needs, or whatever, as Marx will call them, or so many other, right? So there are certain, to look at art, maybe, I don't know, to play music, all of these things, right? Spiritual nourishment, right? All of these things are also, and these are also, for example, not necessarily only atomized, whatever, individuated needs, right? These are also social needs, right? So to that extent, labor, the point in a certain sense is, if labor as this economic category, which is, again, remember, we cannot think of these terms without keeping in mind this abstraction, this existence of this really abstract economic world, right? This economic determination, which is real in capitalism. Because when we are talking about abolition of labor, we are talking about labor within this economic objectified abstract world. Because if that is, or if we can imagine even for a moment the abolition of that aspect, or that kind of labor, this economic labor, this objectified, this alienated labor, then the distinction between labor and crafts disappears. It's difficult to articulate even in these terms, because then also it tends to fall into problems. But the point is that that to make a table, as a doing some carpentry as something, as a leisurely activity, where you just you like as a hobby or something, why should that be different automatically somehow than producing a table for for our needs, right? This distinction that happens between labor as something that you do because of an imposition or something, and this other kind of labor that you do, which is just like arts and crafts, or some kind of self-fulfilling thing. Like labor itself is or labor, again, when I'm talking about labor right now, I mean more in terms of that metabolism, that interaction between man and its external environment, in sense, or whatever, right? With others, with material things, right? And that is wealth. Now that would be wealth, and this is something which Marx goes more into, what wealth can be, or whatever, how we can think about wealth in Grundrisse or whatever. But like in here, he only talks about it in terms of, okay, material wealth, like what use values are made up of, or things like that. But so abolition of labor, right, for me, is the abolition of this world where human activity, right? Human activity, again, it's human activity is purposeful, goal-oriented human activity, which is to a great extent necessary for our survival. So of course the point is not to all of this is only the problem or the question, to the extent that that our labor and human activity doesn't produce and reproduces classes of individuals, as groups, whereby then you have a certain number of people who are only doing the cleaning the shed, cleaning toilets, or something like that, which is like necessary essential labor, and then so that others are free. Precisely, partly the point is, okay, even if it is only that kind of labor, that is the essential labor that is still left, why is it that only certain people will do that? That already implies that we still have a maintenance of a division of labor, right? Precisely the point is not only an abolition of labor. An abolition of labor is nothing unless it is also at the same time an abolition of the division of labor, right? Unless it is also at the same time, which we have right now, as in this highly developed stage, we have division of labor as very intensified division of labor, very specialized division of labor, the root beginning of which is already at the division of intellectual and manual labor, right? Which is precisely why Zonrathel essentially calls, like that's the main root of the thing that he's identifying, right? So from that division, you already have then this development of this multiple levels of division of labor. So even if, say, only this essential labor is still required, we arrive at a certain stage of development of productive forces and all of those things, and that labor is still required. Well, who decides, or what decides that it's only going to be those some people who will keep on doing that, and while the others sit and sip their wine, right? No, how, and precisely the point is, right now there is an automated mechanism installed to relegate specific tasks to specific people, right? Which is this impersonal mute compulsion of the market, silent compulsion of the market, or whatever, which is basically imposition of labor and maintenance of division of labor through value, right? Through abstract labor and labor time as its measure, right? So precisely the point is, if this goes away, if this automatic allocation of the division of labor and all of that goes away, then it will have to be either by necessity somebody's conscious, forceful decision to impose division of labor and to enforce a certain rule of, okay, why somebody does this work and somebody else drinks wine. Or it will have to be, if it becomes that conscious, then it will have to be questioned, right now the problem is precisely because it does not even enter consciousness. It's like, oh, it's the invisible hand of the market that's doing it. It's not our fault, anybody's fault, really, right? Like, yeah, I don't know. Wait, I think you're muted if you said.
I said nothing yet, but I would like to say something.
You go first, Rudy.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you in the sorry, okay. Could we, it's a shame that Daniel is not here, because could we think of that what Marx is doing is what Hegel is doing with spirit? Is Marx doing this with labor?
In what? So what's Hegel doing with spirit?
That the like this movement from itself to itself back again via mediation. It alienates itself from itself so it can return, but it's changed. Because I started to think about this, like like with nature. And we are not so far yet in Marx that I want to like make a claim about him, or like judge this yet. But that I'm like, okay, so and we have talked in a different course about it, that I made the claim that I think that alienation is something Marx also understands as happening in nature itself. Like, why are humans even here? So in this sense, in this like enmeshed humanity within nature, and there were use values produced via this metabolism, something necessarily had to get decentralized, something had to alienate this. This is not an evil outside force came and did it, but the process itself somewhere along the way got decentralized, decentered. And in this sense, I mean, if he understands labor as doing that, like what Hegel understands spirit doing.
So, okay, couple of things about that. First, like I usually, this parallelism with Hegel and the spirit, like I do that too sometimes, but only very like provisionally, in a sense, not and to an extent I am often a little hesitant of doing that. But in any case, what I would say is, I mean, this parallel has obviously been made, right? And like there is the whole that well, what one of the parallels that I know more of is in terms of that, Hegel's spirit, Weltgeist, and, all of that is basically human society as such, human collective society. But precisely with Hegel, it remains, it is already abstracted, it is already this external kind of thing. And so it is really human, concrete humans, like history, which Hegel sees as this, so precisely what we are looking at in this third section of, the concrete becoming the mode of manifestation of the abstract. In Hegel, like really existing nations of people or, races and all merely become the manifestation of this abstract spirit that passes through them, right? And then so it is only representing their, spirits movement, right? All these nations and everything. And this is like, yeah, that's one. The other, to the extent that this, that there was something in a sense already decentered, right, about the human, that it needed to then, like, so this alienation, that one alienation, which is why, like, in Marx, I feel it's important to maintain the separation between, just like, everything for Marx has a dual character, this thing, human activity itself has this dual character. And not trans-historically, not to say that human practice or activity always has this dual character. No, it is something specific right now, which is, so there are, to the extent that human practice has this dual character, there is a dual kind of alienation that happens, which is, okay, so what's the dual nature of human practice? One is this objective material, metabolism with nature, whereby we produce, like material sensuous, coarsely sensuous things, right? And then there is this other activity that we do, whereby we produce this abstract substance, right? Whereby we do abstract labor and we produce abstract value, right? So now there is clearly, obviously, a kind of alienation happening in the second one, which is precisely what leads to reification, and then, the production of this abstract world, which then comes to rule over, real living, both things and humans, whatever, right? On the other hand, this first kind of, labor or metabolism, right, with nature, can also absolutely be thought of in terms of alienation, which is precisely what I was saying earlier, right? That this, when I turn, some wood into a table, in a sense, yeah, I have in that process, call it alienated or objectified, or, right? It's a process of making object what was living when I was, doing all the whatever, carpentry on the wood. And once my living labor stopped, like Marx at one point calls it labor, or living labor is the form giving fire. Which basically what that is it gives form, and that's all labor in this sense does. It only merely transforms the shape or the form of matter as it is given, right? So when he says labor is the father and earth is the mother of, something, right? I think it was in the first chapter, right? I mean, the point he's making there is precisely that what labor in that sense, so this alienation, and precisely this alienation is necessary precisely because human is decentered. What that means is precisely, which is what I was saying when I, put this question of back to you guys, which is that, well, can we just imagine that we will become so centered, in the sense so complete, that we would not even need, no, precisely we need to be doing this metabolism with nature, with this interaction with nature, precisely because we are not complete, right? So that is why we need to labor, in this sense we need to alienate our living, activity and embody it into these physical objects, right? Or embody it in the sense of transform the shape of these physical objects. So this is the sense in which, use values are the, component or whatever of wealth, but not of value by itself, or value comes from abstract labor. And again, abstract labor is this abstraction, it's not a real thing, right? This is an abstraction, which, so when Marx was talking about this free association of men, etc., right? So what he's saying is, well, at that point, so this abstraction can actually be used consciously merely as a abstraction. The problem with, abstract time and abstract labor right now is that it's not even a tool for us. In this situation where it is the unconscious result of our activity, we are the tool for value, right? It is so this abstraction, precisely because it is an abstraction, it should have a different relationship with us. It is thought like, right? But rather what currently happens, that gets inverted. So in that case, I mean, definitely, like, so what Hegel, in a sense, I mean, this, I know this has been said, like, even the thing about, spirit basically being human society and its own development. Adorno definitely says this, that he has these three studies on Hegel, in which the first essay is basically where he, makes all these comparisons with Marx and Hegel and, all of these things. Then there is Lukács absolutely does this. Lukács has this very last project that he was working on before he, like he could never finish this. It was called the Ontology of the Social Being. And so we only have like these three, half volume kind of things. So there, Lukács also very explicitly, Lukács basically says that Hegel essentially sort of ontologized labor, turned labor into this kind of a ontological principle of being, or, of history and everything. So all the characteristics that are true for labor as a purposeful activity, where you goal-oriented activity, that you have an idea, okay, you want something, flat with, on which you can put some things on, you have the idea of a table, and so that is when you, get to work on the wood to transform its shape into that, right? So for Hegel, he turns this into, this trans-historical principle of Geist or something itself, which is already headed towards that, that purposeful goal or something. So like, there are these, but I don't know. I still feel like, maybe to an extent we can, but yeah, I mean, can think, this.
Do, is it going to be improper of us to keep going, or should we let you go, man? Because your time is important here.
Well, no, I guess I can stick around for like 10-15 more minutes. I mean, sort of, ending this. But Nikesh also had a question which I, totally skipped on.
Okay. Well, then I want to say, because what I had raised my hand about before relates actually here. I can kind of piggyback off of what Rudy's saying, and I was going to talk about why it matters. Some of these things that might seem a little, because this is also, part of the podcast. This is also being premiered on, Sunday and everything, and so what seems like an irrelevant or too deep in the weeds issue to some people passing by or looking in, which is something I've heard. Oh, you guys are way in the weeds, man. Wow, you guys are so granular. Oh, so scholastic or whatever. And it's like, well, it cashes out though, like at the level of people's real lives. If the people who want to seize the means and actually harness the productive powers don't have some conceptual clarity going in. Now, we can also be super critical of that approach to change, and maybe there's other approaches to change. But I'm just putting this out there to say, whether from below, from above, from democratic, authoritarian, I don't care what way the change is made. The concepts have to be clear, and not, I don't think that's always true. It's not true with all concepts. Like, I don't think that it would be true with like objet périllat and the big other. No, but it matters when we're talking about labor power, wealth versus value, and then alienation. And the reason I want to bring it back to alienation here before I get into the why it matters for us a little bit more is because Rudy's doing this thing again. I've seen you, Rudy. You're doing it. He's probably going to make some killer essay about it, but it'll be a more killer essay if you make sure to take really seriously this concern. The concern is that once you, because I did the fire emoji on your comment, which was like, oh, so the problem is so we don't have enough alienation yet, or like, oh, we just need more alienation, right? I did the fire emoji because I think it's a fire thought, because I get where you're coming from, and where you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that where that thought is going is to say, more alienation would mean this sort of automation taking over. So it's that kind of labor that takes over and becomes the main thing. But once again, going back to the 4 kinds of alienation in estranged labor, automation is none of those 4 things. You can say that in a sort of strict metaphysical sense, if you want to do some Deleuzian, everything is difference all the time, man, everything's always becoming its opposite or becoming other than what it was. Or you can also kind of do that with Hegel or whatever. And it's like, well, I'm not talking about metaphysics. I'm talking about when people go in and try to make changes and they have a concept. Those concepts can be good or bad, and they can conflate. And if they conflate, then they get harmful. If that people just were to say, yeah, more alienation, good actually, because well, the first kind of alienation is from the fruit of your labor, right? Well, obviously we don't want more alienation in that sense. Second kind of alienation, over the actual things you do throughout your day. You know, the direction that you spend your life force, which we would say is time energy. Well, that is obviously not the kind that we want more alienation from. The third kind, from our species being. If our species being is including spiritual nourishment and understanding towards the universal, so that we can make conscious free choices, so as to spend our time cooperatively and autonomously, well, then that's not the kind of alienation I want either, because I want to be able to do those things. And then if it's the fourth kind, which was from one another, we could always say, like, we are always alienated from one another because we're always misrecognizing each other and all. But what he means is our ability to be even intelligible to one another. And in that sense, I do care about communication and human intercourse. And so in that sense, no, I don't want to be alienated either. And so it's like, those are 4 ways that I don't want to be alienated. And then if I have to say that, you know, the automation is a kind of alienation, it's like, yeah, but it's not essentially in any of the 4 ways that matters. And therefore we could just call it the objectification of labor and not confuse it with alienation, because we could make everything into alienation, but I don't want to. And then if you decide that you want to go that direction, I give you my blessing. I look forward to your critique, you know, but I do want you to at least sit with that, my elaboration on what I kind of said already in the CDT discussion section of that lecture, because I've been thinking about it a lot since then as well, obviously. And so then to bring it back to what I was going to say earlier to Sahil, is just that part of why this matters is also just because when we're talking about everyone doing their part, and from each according to their own, to each according to their ability, I fear 2 alternative futures, dependent on 2 tendencies of people who might try to lead those changes. The first is that suddenly the production of Taylor Swift bobbleheads is considered a necessity, and we're actually spending our time doing what's called socially necessary chores, producing things that I would rather die than have any part in, right? So there is that, you know, whereas obviously Andre Gores is going to say, no, it's still going to be ball bearings. We know it's going to be ball bearings for everybody. It doesn't even matter if you're Amish. You want ball bearings and you're not going to produce it yourself. So you might have to grow some wheat to get, you know, your necessary labor time done, but you want ball bearings for your community. That makes sense, right? And so like that's so ball bearings is the extreme on the side of like, that's a need. It's a socially constructed need because it's a sort of contingent in a sense, but it's a need because it saves so much time. And on the other side, there's stuff where it's like, well, my daughter wants the Taylor Swift bobblehead. Well, fucking too bad. And guess what? If you really cared, then because you love her so much, you can go carve one from wood or build it out of, you know what I mean? But you don't, that's not going to be heteronymous labor that is considered necessary. And so then this raises the ugly head of what needs are. And that's where my biggest concern is not on the side of the excessive, now we're producing fake needs. No, it's on the other side. The other side is, well, actually, all that we need is bread and water, homie, like beans and rice. Like, we actually don't need Lego. Okay, well, if we don't need Lego, okay, Hannah, okay, Taylor Swift bobbleheads is one thing, but if my kids don't get Lego, I'm out. You know what I mean? So it's like there is this this gray area, obviously, and Lego even being included is an argument that would have to be had, because people might go, oh, if I want Lego in my society, then I'm gonna have to do a little bit more chores for the next 100 years, because our transitional plan shows that would have to be the case, and that's fine. But the thing is that right now what we have is a society of producer consumers who are used to doing bullshit jobs or shitty toil and consuming things that don't matter. And what that means is that if there was some major transformation, on the one side you've got people who want the Hannah Montana bobblehead, and on the other, or the Taylor Swift, and on the other side you've got people who are like, actually, no, we can all be Spartans. We can sleep on floors. We don't need beds. And the issue with that is that there's the radical imagination is lacking, because people aren't thinking of the kinds of things that matter, which would be time, energy, and talent, and tutelage. And this is where, by the way, so that Nikesh knows, I'm referencing Benjamin Studebaker's lecture that he gave the CDT cohort this last Sunday. And Sahil, I think you got the link for that in your email, but Nikesh, I'd be happy to share it with you. But he develops time energy theory using some Plato, Aristotle, and Confucius to say that in every good society, all of these older ideas have the idea that there would be some people in charge of, sages or philosopher kings they have to try to think about what the good is, and they have to think about realistic ways that people can live a good life. And part of that is and he really played up this point, which lends itself to this whole conversation, and that is the adjudication over what's necessary, not just necessary to your physical needs or your consumer wants, but also to your spiritual needs. And that would include, well, if you have a talent for the violin, you should be able to practice on that motherfucker as much as you want. And if you have a talent for philosophy, you should be able to have access to whatever philosophy books you need. And you don't know that you have a talent in any of those things until you've had proper tutelage in the first place, right? And so some kind of a universal education system that helps you figure out what your talents are, not just to become a worker, a professional, or manager. And so that's where I'm coming from, is mainly the concern that as consumer producers, we either go minimalist and think we should sleep on the floor and not produce beds and eat rice and beans, or on the other side, we're making all this excess crap because people aren't thinking about the 3 T's, which was time, energy, tutelage, and talent. So that's pretty much how I'm piggybacking off of Benjamin Studebaker. And I can't recommend that lecture highly enough. And so to the people who are listening to this on the podcast in the near future, as well as the people who are watching this on YouTube, I just want to let you all know that you 100% get access to that lecture if you just email hello.theoryunderground@gmail.com. In the same way that people can give like a free trial to a subscription, I would just call that like a free lecture. It is for the subscribers, these lectures, but like that lecture is a standalone treasure, and I want you to all have access to it, especially since we've been referencing it in the last few things that we've done on this channel, and we're probably going to keep referencing it for the foreseeable future. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a longer conversation, in totality, right? And we'll definitely, go deeper into this at some point. But I guess partly all I would say at the moment is all these questions are, in a sense, questions for Marx, but only he doesn't address these specifically because he doesn't think you can prefigure them, in a sense. Like these, what shape society will have, or, how we'll think. that will depend on, certain practices. And currently, given the state, like how the world functions, how the world really works, in this point, you can, create all kinds of utopias to an extent, within this world itself. Like you can have your own, tiny utopias. Maybe they'll work for, 5 years or something, then they'll break down or whatever. But you cannot just, project an image of what a free society really will be. And because that is partly the reason why, like, you'll see such, like, out of all the, amount of writing that Marx has done, you barely, apart from maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs here and there, in totality, you do not see him, going into that, right? Because I mean, partly because for him, the point is, this the materialist, perspective, which essentially is to say, no, we do not, our practice is not determined by our thought is determined by the practice or our social being, right? And so in this world, you're right, like in this world, of course, people can only think in these kind of ways, or they won't think about these things at all, because you can only, irrespective of how radical one thinks today, in terms of what you can do, there are real limits, or and because, or what the most radical things that you even can do at best will only be individually, or again, maybe you're able to gather 5 people and do something crazy, or it will not actually be transformative of the world. It can either be transformative of the world, or it will not be, actually transformative, right? So yeah. Oh, no, yeah, that whole discussion we can also leave some other. uh
Yeah, for sure. We
Yeah.
got to let you go in a second. So, do you have any closing thoughts you want to say before we let you go?
Like, okay, for now today, like, this is all I'll say. See, Capital, the book, Capital is this dual, dual work that he's doing, which is both presenting, yeah, I know. Right, he's doing these
Wait,
two
wait, wait,
things.
wait, wait. Did Nikesh not get to ask his question at all?
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
go.
no worries. I can just like chat
No,
with
no,
him.
no,
like,
no, 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 no. You've been here this whole
later.
time. You're a guest. You're a guest. Yeah, I hope you come back, but if you don't, then I would regret it for the rest of my life. Please.
No, I guess like I like yeah, I was okay, like kind of my question was there's an unconscious sort of practice, material practice that shapes our thought, right? And then kind of going back to Dave's point on like fetishization, alienation, reification, and commodity fetishism is sort of historically specific form of reification that happens under capitalism. And as a result of that, we get this sort of like, another plane of reality of like value, like as this objective thing that turns things into this atomized units, right? And so in the sense, even under capitalism also, and kind of what you said, like it is a social practice, but it's not a collective practice. It's a practice of atomized individuals in a social setting, right? And so I was, instead of, I guess, like trying to project it into future of utopia or something, I was trying to go back to the past, because insofar as we've been under class societies, like that must be the case under this sort of materialist theory. And then and yet something is different, right? Like in the sense of like being under capitalism in this atomized sort of way. And so I was just trying to tease apart like what is happening in reification. That's, I don't know, we can take example of like feudalism or agriculture, or like, I don't know, we can go back any point in time, but then trying to tease apart reification there, right?
Okay, that's a good point, because see, even Marx, pre-capitalist societies are not yet atomized. Like those are still collectives. The fact that they are, collectives, that's actually in a sense a good thing, but but that the problem is, okay, pre-capitalist societies at least were collectives. Capitalist society is not really a collective. It's just a, assemblage of individuals, doing their own thing and producing this reality as an unconscious result, right? This is value judgment said this is a bad, thing about capitalism, that it's not even a collective practice. On the other hand, to great extent, because pre-capitalist societies, but were also fragmented in different ways. There were different kinds of practices. A major part of at least those societies was still collective practice. That's the aspect that they were still collective practices. That's a good thing. But the problem is, let's not, romanticize, because that's one danger, right? Because at least, there was the community back then. Today there isn't any, right? Back then, because at least, like, people had real relations with each other or whatever, right? Whereas we don't have anymore. So there's the danger of falling into this kind of a romanticization of that collectivity. But okay, it was collective, that is good. But the problem is that it was still not, because it was still class societies. Division of labor was already there, right? Division of labor like already beginning with the division between intellectual and manual, and then which further and further keeps on developing, right? And so to the extent it is true they were collective societies, but they were not still, they were still class societies, and there was still division of labor. So that is for me, so reification was also functioning there, but that it had a different, mode or different process. And again, precisely because labor itself was not abstracted in this form, precisely why even the reification was not based on labor, right? Reification had a different mode. So religion was the mode of reification, and how, God and, religious institution would organize society, or will mediate, social relations, right? Here, the mode of mediation has been taken on by abstract labor as, value that then mediates. So this objectivity, so commodity as a fetish mediates social reality in this form, in this society, whereas in previous societies it was a different kind of reification that was the mediator of, social reality, even though those were still more collective, really collective forms of societies, but there was still alienation, there was still, reification involved, right? In this one, it's the mode is a different kind of a, process. Like that's how I think I would put it. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think I'll just, say my last things about the thing, and which is, like, see, this is both political economy and its critique, in the sense that this is both a charting out of what this reality and what the nature of this reality is, and at the same time, in charting that out, it is a critique, right, of this reality, which is precisely pointing out, that this is not an eternal reality, and it is at the same time demonstrating both its logic and its history of how it came about, how it developed in this form, right? So to trace the development of these forms from real practices and how they generate, this reality, right? And so we need to really be, in that sense, attentive to these both aspects. We do also need to understand, okay, how is it that value functions and, money functions, and, surplus value is extracted, exploitation, or rather, how does domination, class domination, right? How does that function, or what's the mode of functioning of class oppression or domination proper to capitalist society? That is, for example, exploitation, right? Which basically means rationalized domination, right? Domination in the society has been, rationalized, and that is the economy. That is the whole logic of the economy, right? And that's what this we are tracing throughout this book, right? Okay, yeah. Then we'll continue ahead with it.
All right. Well, then everybody put your hands together, figuratively or literally. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sahil and Nikesh. It was so great to have you here. Everybody, have a great rest of your day, week. And for the folks who are watching this live or premiering on the channel or listening to it from podcasts, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. I say that like it's not very serious, but it is serious. Because if you don't do it, you'll never see us again. You got to teach the algorithm your desire. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, a place for workers with earbuds who are tired of the bullshit and just want to get down to it. Big ideas, rigorous thinking, and ultimately liberation from necessity.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation. Theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
Theory Underground is coming to a city near you. Besides a commitment to publishing certain underground theorists and popularizing certain fundamental concepts, we have toured the United States and are touring Europe to promote our ideas, courses, and publications.
You've been reading Underground Theory.
Amazing book. I'm a publisher and an editor. I run and review of books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Okay, picture this scene. America, early 2021. An Amazon warehouse worker arises from the emerging underground theory internet scene to create spaces for untimely topics and concerns that are too often neglected or kept in isolation today. Joined by a revolving cast of underground theorists, academics, and critics, he establishes what will become Theory Underground, a teaching, research, and publishing platform by and for working-class intellectuals, autodidacts, and academics who want to do more than they're able to do within the confines of academia. That warehouse worker's name is David McKerracher, and his book Timenergy is his first major contribution to the world of theory. It was recently reprinted with a foreword by none other than Slavoj Žižek, who also contributed to Theory Underground's latest book.
My Bible, it's an excellent book.
A collection of essays called Underground Theory.
What you just heard is an excerpt from the Strange Exiles podcast, episode 23, where Bram from Strange Exiles interviewed me and Mikey. For those who don't know, Mikey is the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog. We are publishing one of his books here shortly at Theory Underground. He's also a lecturer at Theory Underground, and he's someone I've been friends and a collaborator with for over 10 years. But most importantly for you all, he's a fantastic lecturer, and it's a crime that he has to do wage labor right now. One of the long-term goals of Theory Underground has been now for a couple of years to hashtag free Mikey. That is something that I've been really pushing, but first, obviously, I have to get freed myself, so the two of us are able to do this because, you know, as Mikey said, build it and they will come. Well, I tried and I built a website and platform. I had my own app and everything, but it's been really buggy and it's more than one person can handle, and that's, you know what, a really good lesson for me. And so for now, what we're doing is moving it to a temporary intermediary platform until we are able to get some more serious funding. And ultimately, we want to be in a place like this, a real brick and mortar digital nomadic mecca where people can come from all over the world. But also, the app was really expensive, and so by quitting it, I am now able to save a lot of money, and with the help of my patrons and the students at Theory Underground, especially the monthly subscribers, I am officially able to quit Amazon and do Theory Underground full time. So thank you so much, everybody. This is one huge step forward. My way of giving back to everybody is by promoting everyone who is at a current tier to the benefits of the tier above them as far as subscribers go, and also rolling out a new lower tier. And so check out the tier subscription setup. And if you're not interested in taking the courses or what's being offered for subscribers and you want to support anyway, check out the Patreon. Finally, just stay tuned for more information on the tour in Europe during the month of May 2024 and the conference in Mexico during the last weekend of October 2024. If you want to be there, hit me up ASAP. Let's get talking, because it's happening very soon. All right, bye-bye. Special shout out to Nikolai, Sahil, and Zatsandra, as well as all of my other amazing patrons over at patreon.com.